What say you about all this, Kuba? We had a great conversation Wednesday night about kind of the perils of a Trump presidency and how it would look very different from his 2016 reign. So, what say you about this current state of affairs in the Middle East with what we're seeing with the Biden-Harris administration, opposed to what we might see with a Trump administration?
Well, one thing that I would flag is that this isn't the only war that might influence the election. The conflict in the Ukraine is
Yes.
ongoing, and there's a substantial Polish population in Pennsylvania that would, I think, under typical circumstances, be happy to give Trump more serious look as a candidate. But when it comes to Russian aggression in the Polish near abroad, depending on how far removed they are from the initial migration from Poland, depending on how like thickly they maintain a connection to the old country, it, they might feel the need to vote for the Democrats because Trump would be an unreliable partner for the war against Russia and Eastern Europe. It's also worth considering what like you said, the difference between a Trump and the Kamala Harris administration. It's hard to know how much more support Israel could get from the United States. The Kamala Biden policy towards the war in Gaza, arms shipments to Israel, it can't. There isn't that much room for it to be friendlier. Uh, Despite rhetoric about pushing for a ceasefire, despite attempts to try to make the United States seem like a champion for Palestinian human rights, I can't get past the fact that the pier that was built supposedly to deliver humanitarian assistance to Palestinians was then used as a staging ground for Israeli strikes into Gaza. That basically tells you all you need to know about the Biden Harris orientation. So, what would Netanyahu get from Trump that he wouldn't from a Democratic presidency? And the only difference that I see is the profound animus that Trump has, even deeper than the Democrats, towards Iran, together with his identification with the Abraham Accords and trying to strike a deal between the Gulf Arabs and Israel. It could be the revival of that type of Sunni Israeli détente is what Netanyahu is going for. Right now, there is the risk that despite every effort to the contrary, despite his entire policy being oriented around boxing in Iranian influence and limiting the reach and solidarity of Shia groups throughout the Middle East, that Mohammed bin Salman is having to find some kind of accord with Iran, which you know increases the leverage of countries like China that can play that broker role that the United States is no longer able to.
Electra, you had something you wanted to add?
I have many things I would like to add
Oh,
because there are many very interesting points raised here, and I don't know how to unpack them all. But let me start with like the regional dynamic. I feel like we have a little bit of a top-down approach to everything, and as if I may share something slightly irrelevant, superficially so. I'm a historian of the 19th century, right? And I focus on, I'm trying to explain revolutions and nationalism in the 19th century and early 20th century, aside from like the socioeconomic and military dynamic and all that. how come that the Greek Revolution was successful, or that the United States, I'm sorry, the European alliance at the time decided to support it in the 1820s and 1830s. And I feel that it's a little illogical, unfair, and conceptually problematic on our end to completely disregard public opinion in the regions that are directly affected by this mayhem. And we're not only talking about the genocide in Gaza, we're talking about the symbolism of it all, and also Israel's overt position that they deserve to expand over Lebanon, Syria, perhaps, and the type of far right nationalistic, expansive arrogance that does not seem to be all that strategic to me anymore, Jean. And I have been following very few Israeli analysts who still oppose the war. And I think they make a very good point, right? Israel does not seem to have a strategy. It is overwhelmed by emotion. And this is a recipe for disaster, according to me, for Israel as well in the long term. But as far as the broader region and the international community is concerned, we have to take into account what has happened in the past 9 months. Israel went from being, the all celebrated only democracy in the Middle East, right? This is how it was presented to the people, and most people don't have a clear idea as to what's happening over there, and by people I mean in the US or Western Europe, etc. So in the past 9 months, like international opinion has turned completely everywhere in the world, included but not limited to the United States of America, right? The last pillar of Israel's standing. Within the Jewish American community, we really have to start paying attention how American Jews feel about all this, especially among the youth, and the unprecedented, really, um, sorry, gigantic changes that are happening. Most important, in the region, I don't think that these very sinister calculations, like the chess game type of approach, apply when 95% of the Arab world, the Islamic world, and everything in between are positioning themselves against the genocide and against Israel at this point. Even an autocracy like Saudi Arabia have to take this into account. And this is why we see unprecedented um, developments, such as what's happening in Qatar, right? With Iran having this meeting in Qatar and then going to Lebanon during the bombings, and they're celebrated for their resilience and defiance. And all of a sudden, we have objectively autocratic religious theocracies, bad actors by all understandings of human rights and international law, demonstrating a much better understanding of how international law works and how important public opinion matters. The ones that seem to be completely ignorant and lost in their own arrogance, I'm going to use the exact same term again, are US administrators and bureaucrats, or whoever is making decisions on behalf of our government right now. And back to the point of like Ukraine, of course, like what's happening in the Middle East is not the only issue regarding tumultuous international developments, but Ukraine and the Middle East are directly connected via Russia, right? So Russia and Iran are in this together, not in full harmony, clearly, but they depend on each other to a certain extent, both for Ukraine and for stopping Israel from completely annihilating everything. And I'm not saying they have the exact same stance, but their military and geostrategic interests are connected. So all of these calculations, first of all, do not take into account public opinion at all. And I think we should, because again, as a historian of the 19th century, I feel like we're talking about the Holy Alliance and the decisions that empires were making at the time. At the end of the day, even empires back in the day could not stop the devastating to them spread of nationalist ideals, and had to adjust their rhetoric in order to survive and defend their own interests. This is like a very pragmatic calculation to think about the people, right? Even if you don't really give a shit about them, you have to take them into account within an empire. And we claim to be democracies. So the international opinion and internal dynamics here in the US, I think, are extremely important from a pragmatic perspective, not due to empty emotion or idealism or anything along these lines. So the fact that regional actors back in the Middle East right now, we have Qatar, right, approaching Iran. And I feel that it's Qatar, not China yet, that is trying to emerge as this, rational actor that is going to step in and take over, given the indisputable American failures of American diplomacy, in lack of a better word. So we see Qatar approaching Iran, and Saudi Arabia. They're not there yet, clearly, but they're saying that they agree with Iran on Gaza, right? That was a statement that was released yesterday. So if we have Saudi Arabia and Iran publicly via Qatar joining forces to a limited extent, but still, and saying that Gaza is a red line for our people, and we have to take that into account, uh, I think it'd be very myopic for us to completely dismiss these developments. Thank you.